The title of this position paper is, "The Most Expensive Part of an LLM Should Be Its Training Data," authored by Nikhil Kandpal and Colin Raffel from the University of Toronto and the Vector Institute. This paper argues that while training large language models, or LLMs, involves massive costs for computation, hardware, energy, and engineering, the true expense should be the human labor behind the training data. LLMs, like those powering chatbots and AI assistants, rely on vast amounts of text from sources such as books, academic papers, code, social media, and the internet. The authors emphasize that this data represents trillions of words created through human effort, which is rarely compensated. In the abstract, the paper highlights that training state-of-the-art LLMs is becoming increasingly costly due to rising demands for resources. However, the often ignored cost is the labor of the people who produce the training data. To make their case, the authors analyzed 64 LLMs released between 2016 and 2024. They estimated the cost of paying people to create equivalent training datasets from scratch, using conservative wage estimates. Their findings show that even with these low estimates, the cost of the training data is 10 to 1,000 times greater than the actual training costs of the models. This represents a significant financial liability for companies developing LLMs. The paper calls for fairer practices and suggests research directions to address this imbalance. Moving to the introduction, the authors note that investment in LLMs has surged due to their impact and potential profitability. Research shows that scaling up training leads to better performance, as demonstrated in studies by Kaplan and colleagues in 2020 and Hoffman and others in 2022. As a result, the cost of training these models is doubling every 9 months. For instance, models like OpenAI's GPT-4 and Google's Gemini Ultra are estimated to have cost tens of millions of dollars, with future models potentially requiring billions, as projected by Morales in 2024. Despite these high costs, one major expense is overlooked: the training data. Most of this data comes from web scraping sources like Common Crawl, which collects text from the public internet at virtually no cost to the AI companies. This data is crucial for the pre-training phase of LLMs, where models learn general language and world knowledge from massive text corpora. However, the creators of this text, authors, writers, and contributors, receive no compensation. The paper points out that they are not aware of any payments being made to these individuals, despite their essential role in enabling LLM success. The paper then discusses the legal and ethical controversies surrounding the use of web-scraped data. Much of this content is protected by copyright laws, leading to ongoing lawsuits from entities like the New York Times, the Authors Guild, Concord Music Group, and various newspapers. These cases argue that using copyrighted material without permission is unlawful. Ethically, critics like Pasquale and Sun in 2024 have pointed out that LLMs can outcompete the very creators whose data they use, which feels exploitative. In response, some organizations have started licensing their data to LLM providers. For example, publishers like The Atlantic, Reuters, Wiley, and Vox Media, as well as social media platforms like Reddit and Shutterstock, have entered into agreements to be compensated. However, the authors stress that this only covers a small portion of the data. The majority still comes from uncompensated sources. To quantify the value of this labor, the paper estimates how much it would cost to pay people to produce the training datasets. They use conservative assumptions, such as the shortest possible time for workers to write the text and minimum wage rates. Even with these cautious estimates, the costs far exceed other expenses like hardware, energy, and research staff salaries. For instance, Figure 1 in the paper plots the training costs of the 64 LLMs against the estimated costs of their datasets, showing that dataset costs are 1 to 3 orders of magnitude higher, meaning 10 to 1,000 times more expensive. The authors conclude their main argument by claiming that the most expensive part of producing an LLM should be compensating the training data producers. This would address the massive gap between the value of the data and the current lack of payment. In the face of these issues, they highlight potential research directions, such as developing methods for fair data attribution, creating sustainable models for data licensing, and exploring ways to integrate compensation into the AI development pipeline. These steps could lead to more ethical and equitable practices in the future, ensuring that the human contributors behind AI's success are properly recognized and rewarded.